First of all, welcome. It's great to see you all here. That's going to be the first and the only word joke I will be making. Because I'm not a comedian. My name is Lars SØRENSEN, and I will be the moderator. I have the honor to host this symposium and also the premiere that you've all come for. And it's a pleasure for me. I do a lot of projects around sustainability, so I was joyful when I was asked to come and host this. I'm not a native English speaker, so if you hear any flaws, please correct me afterwards. We'll discuss a little bit about it. I'm from Holland, and we are surrounded by the sea. If you're born in Holland, the sea is pretty much always a theme in your life. Whether you're living in Den Haag or you're living in Enschede, one of the times in the year you'll go to the sea, you want to see and smell the sea, and you will be taught at school the influence that the sea has on our daily lives. Preferably thinking of all the structures that we have to create to even be able to live in Holland. We'll have a lot of international guests, so as a courtesy to our guests, we'll be hosting this session in English. And at this moment, I would also like to welcome our viewers online. Hello, YouTube viewers. Maybe we could all say hello. We have like thousands of people tuned in. Say hello to our viewers. Hello, viewers. Yes. We're going to have so much fun here. Sorry you couldn't make it, but still, it's good that you're watching because it's an important topic. The seas, we want to make sure that hopefully you have children, or maybe you have grandchildren, or you're thinking about children, or you're practicing to go and get children. You would want to leave them the earth at least in the way that you found it, and even better, maybe even a little bit cleaner. And this is where the problem of the seas come in. Well, I'm not a researcher. I didn't spend 3 years on researching how we could deal with the problem of marine litter. So we're going to have a lot of experts here on stage talking to you about what they discovered in their research and their conclusions. We're going to look at the film that's been made about how big the problem is, but maybe even about what we could do to get to solutions and make it a better place. So to make sure that we have the right people here, we also need to make sure we have the right people in the audience, because we could have brilliant information being generated here, but if you don't, you're not focused and not concentrating on receiving it, then you would have come for nothing. So that's a waste. So what we need to do is to prepare you for receiving the information. So we need to be like a group that's ready to learn stuff. And to be a group, you have to know each other a little bit better. Who sees people in the room? Who's seeing people you don't know? Just to have a check. So we have a lot of options to make new network. So let's do this. I would like to invite you to make a new connection. So because now we have all these solo drops of water, and we need to become an ocean. Yes. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to invite you to, for 30 seconds, just get to know someone you didn't already know, you didn't came here with. So you need a new face. Just look around you. 30 seconds is going to go so fast, so make sure you're not left out. 30 seconds to meet someone new in front or in the back, and the time has started already. I always find it a good sign that people find it hard to stop talking. So probably an interesting discussion is developing, but we'll have to do that in a break or after the session. Who's met some nice people? Yeah, that's a trick question, right? People will always be looking. I hope he raises his hand, yes. Okay, so from all these solo drops of water, we've created an ocean. Hopefully you've get to know someone. And what I would like you to do, we'll have some moments in the program where you need to reflect, where you need to take in a little bit what you've just heard, because a lot of information is going to come your way. And this is the moment where you could also get back in touch with the person you just met and reflect a little bit, because two will always hear a lot more and different information than just you. So I hope you'll be helpful to each other. So to give a little bit of context to this a major project that's taken 3 years, and it's going to find a part of a conclusion right here in the film we're going to see, but also in the presentations of many contributors to this symposium. We're going to kick it off by our first speaker. She's also going to receive the first applause. And this is always an anxious moment. Many of the people here, they're not used to talking to a crowd like you. So you can help them a little bit. I always say what you give, you will get back. So if you give a very nice and energetic applause, the speech will be a lot better. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get her to the stage, the project coordinator. Please give it up for Heather Leslie.
Welcome everybody today to the Eye, and welcome everybody online as well. I'm going to tell you the 3 important things that you have to know to help you get through this afternoon. The first is, what is marine litter? The second is, what kind of problem are we dealing with here? And the third thing is how the CleanSea project has been studying it. So, marine litter, it might be familiar to most of you here. It's human-created garbage. It's the bottles, nets, and printers that you can find on the seabed. You can find all kinds of human products, human-created products on beaches, and also floating and cruising around in our oceans. We make a lot of stuff, and a lot of it becomes our waste, and we are not perfect at managing this waste, so we get some of it leaking into the environment. It's, of course, reflecting our products. So there are many materials in marine litter. But in this past century, plastics really have challenged the traditional materials, and they won. So much of our stuff is now plastic, and that's not surprising that much of our marine litter is now plastic. And what happens to that stuff? It doesn't stay in perfect form. It also can break down, especially something we've looked at a lot in the CleanSea project is microplastics. And these are tiny fragments from bigger pieces. And there are also some pre-production pellets, so manufactured tiny pieces, and all of these can find their way into the marine environment. The second thing I wanted to tell you is what kind of problem this is. This is a wicked problem, something that we've been using since the 70s in science to describe typical problems of our globalized, interconnected world. They are unfortunately resistant to studying them and analysis, and also resistant to solutions. There's never one correct solution to a wicked problem. There are no correct answers, and there might be many different things you can try. Wicked problems are also a symptom of another problem, and I think that marine litter is a symptom of things like our linear economy, which is again a symptom of other problems. So you can see how complicated it's getting. I think that the problems of marine litter are also interconnected to other global problems, and I think also the solutions, so the people working in Paris today, are also helping us a little bit. So, the EU doesn't like the plastic soup or marine litter, and they decided, even though it's a wicked problem, they were going to try to ask some researchers to figure out this wicked problem. And these were our questions, our daunting questions. Like, what is this marine litter doing to marine life, and what's it doing to us and our economies and our societies? We also wanted to know where it's going. What's the fate of all of this? We wanted to know what causes it and what we can do about it. Since it's a big problem, we needed a big team, and we're even bigger than the picture you see on the screen. We have an interdisciplinary project because, as you see from the list of questions that we had, we really needed to look at very different angles of this issue. We also, because it's a European project, we wanted to look at the different marine regions. So you can see behind me the 4 marine regions of the EU, and you see the sprinkling of the yellow dots. That's us, sprinkled all over Europe from up north in Norway to down deep in Greece. And this is a description of our work. You can see that we really wanted to focus on exposure and effects, especially of microplastics. We wanted to look at how this stuff breaks down into little bits, where it's going, and we really have to get better at figuring out how to sample this stuff and analyze it. We looked at drivers of the problem. We looked at what kind of costs this has for society, and then we started to look at policy instruments, economic incentives, and other kinds of policy mixes, which you're going to hear about this afternoon. I hope you are going to enjoy your time, and thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you to CleanSea for having the European Environment Agency here to share a little bit of the knowledge that we are building around the issue that you're all discussing today. I'm going to use the microphone to be a bit more mobile. What I'm going to bring you as an expert audience is not a lot of the knowledge that you have been bringing to this theme, but I would like to frame the discussion that you are having today and all the knowledge in a sort of broader perspective of societal transitions. So we look at marine litter as a trigger for innovation and also a consequence of fundamentally unsustainable systems of production and consumption, which are leading to marine litter. For those of you who do not know the European Environment Agency, we are a network organization, an institution of the European Union. We are responsible for bringing relevant and good knowledge to the European policymakers on environment and climate issues. We do that with 39 countries, about 300 institutions, several thousand people that work with us. We're in Copenhagen, and this is what we do. And usually when we show who we show the land mass of Europe with all the countries. But of course, today I'm showing the land mass and the sea mass, which is about 25% larger than the land mass of Europe. So most of Europe's territory is actually sea and ocean. So I will focus on that part of Europe, but especially on the interaction between what happens on land and what happens in the sea. When we frame our knowledge, we focus on three sort of time periods in European policy and three ambition levels. Part of our work is to report on an annual basis on the key European environmental directives. We write our reports on clean water or on the state of forests or on those things. And that's the sort of basic work that we do based on indicators and data gathering. But we increasingly look at the 2020 and 2030 agenda in Europe because this is a much broader framing and it has relevance to many of the policies that have an impact on oceans but also on terrestrial ecosystems and the interactions between them. In other words, it's the climate policy, climate and energy, 2020, and it's moving to 2030, as you know. This will have an impact also on oceans, if for nothing else on acidification, if it's a successful policy. This is the outcome of Paris could have a huge impact there. But we also look specifically at the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which of course has a target for what the status of our sea should be. There is a link with marine litter. Just yesterday, we had the circular economy package that comes out, and marine litter is mentioned in it. There is also a plastics strategy in the circular economy. So those things are bridging what we do today in a broader framework for 2020 and 2030. But an important innovation in Europe's policy is that we are increasingly framing visions for 2050. And the vision of for Europe for 2050, in essence, and let me go back one here, is in the vision of the 7th Environment Action Programme. And it says that we will live well within the limits of our planet. And in order to do that, we have to focus on three different issues. First of all, move to a circular economy away from the linear model where we dig up, we produce not terribly well, we use it one or a couple of times, and then we throw it away and it ends up partially in the oceans, right? We need to go to a more circular model. Secondly, we need to protect natural capital, biodiversity, in a much more fundamental way. When we are not doing that today, that is quite obvious. And thirdly, we have to go low carbon. And all three of those, of course, have a close link with the oceans and the seas as part of that fundamental planetary set of ecosystems and in the way they interact. So this is the framing within which we bring our knowledge. And every 5 years, we bring together the best knowledge that we have in our State and Outlook of the Environment report. And we launched that in March of this year. And what are the 4 key messages of this report? First of all, policies matter. and they deliver when they combine three qualities. They have to be ambitious, well implemented, and well designed. And unfortunately, many of the policies also relating to sea and oceans are not terribly well designed, and they are not terribly well implemented. So then they don't deliver. Yeah? But when they deliver, they produce three outcomes. One is a better environment, which one would hope is the result of environmental policies. Secondly, they deliver a more healthy environment. And I think when you consider oceans, microplastics, what ends up in the food chain, there is a very clear link there. And also they deliver a space for innovation. Environmental policies driving innovation in our systems of production and consumption. Now, regardless of all the progress that we've made in Europe in the last 4 decades on the environment and on climate, the fundamental problems that we're facing today are systemic. Yeah? They are systemic and focusing on 4 key systems: the energy system, the transport and mobility system, the food and agricultural system, and the urban system, all 4 with high relevance and interactions to the topic that you are discussing today, and increasingly understood in a global dimension, a global systemic dimension. The third conclusion is that the normal model of policy making, which I call the institutionalized salami model, where every year you hope that by a little slice, if we can only move the graph 0.7% every year, we will end up in 2050 with a circular economy, low carbon, and strong natural capital. The answer is no. Yeah? The answer is no. We will have to move towards a more transitional perspective. And of course, in the Netherlands, when you mention the term transitions, the intellectual community around transitions is very deeply embedded in this country's intellectual tradition. So we need to move to transitions, but Europe shouldn't fear those transitions. In fact, they open up opportunities to be at the forefront of innovation, of knowledge, of new technologies, of societal innovation also. And so we are actually rather well positioned to be leaders when it comes to that type of innovation. When you say that we will live well within the limits of the planet, it also means for the agency, this is a drawing from our multi-annual work program, that I think we need to move radically away from the old conceptualization of sustainability. You know, the 3 circles, the social, the economic, and the environmental, and where they magically overlap, we draw the arrow and we say sustainable. This is, of course, intellectual nonsense. On a finite planet, you cannot have a little bit of sustainability in the long run. The challenge is to organize our socio-economic systems within the boundary conditions of ecosystem qualities. And those are degrading. So the space that we have to come to that sustainable society is shrinking. Yeah? And that is the real challenge that we have to do. And when you talk about resources and ecosystem services and waste and emissions, I think that is at the heart of what you have been researching and what you're discussing today. To illustrate a bit what the difference is between the old paradigm of policy making and the new one, I think it's clear that we've made efficiency gains in the car engine, and I know that there is some doubt about some of those gains and how they have been documented. But overall, it's fair to say that our car today is much more fuel efficient than a car from 20 and 30 years ago. Yeah? But of course, if you want to decarbonize the mobility system, you're not going to get there by making a combustion engine more efficient. There is a tangential limit to that. The real breakthrough is something else. Yeah? So some people say, well, then we will all drive electric. Yeah? That's a real breakthrough. It's indeed a different technology. Yeah? Very high efficiency compared to a combustion engine. I think it would be even more of a breakthrough technology if these batteries are connected to a flexible renewable energy system and they deal with intermittency problems. Then you have a real systemic breakthrough. But if we all drive that electric car in the same way as our combustion car, yeah, this will still be the vision from the Berlaymont building in Brussels into the heart of the city, and the Rue de la Loi, the Wetstraat, a grey, heartless, ugly street in the capital of Europe, being Belgian, I think I can say that. Anybody who designed that street, I would like to have a talk with them, but anyway. So this is clearly not the systemic breakthrough that we need. A real systemic vision is what is the driving force, the set of drivers behind mobility. And you end up in spatial planning. You end up in the organization of work-life balance issues. You end up in very different things. And of course, we need mobility. So then you end up, what sort of systems do we have to deal with mobility? And at the end of the day, the car will still play a role in that. And then you want a zero-emission car, and then you may end up with that engine. But you do not start from the engine, you start from the system. And this is the sort of thinking that we are fundamentally engaging in, and I think it has high relevance also for discussing the topic of marine litter. And I will come to that a bit later. Let's now look at the 4 key systems that I mentioned and how they relate to the marine environment. Of course, the energy system, where we are moving much more to a renewable system, and this is also at stake, I think, in Paris. And on the one hand, you have the old oil and gas, and we know in Europe that there is a close link with the marine environment. On the one hand, to get the energy to burn it and to contribute to global warming, greenhouse gas emissions. On the other hand, also the oil that is the basic resource to make virgin plastics that then end up again very close to the place where the basic material was pumped up. That's the irony of it, of course. So that's clearly not a sustainable way to do. Now we can use the sea's environment also to build a more renewable system of energy. This is the largest renewable energy facility in Denmark, Anholt, but there are many other ways of working with the sea to deal with energy systems. And of course, if we do not do that and we stick to the old system, it will lead to problems of acidification, it will lead to problems of shifting widths, bandwidths where biodiversity appears. So the old system is not just the energy system. There is a close interaction with the oceanic and sea environment, the natural capital that is there. It's that sort of complex systemic interaction that I think we need to reflect on. One back. Then of course the food system, and we look at green chemistry, because a lot of what we do in terms of transport but also conservation in the food system is related to plastics. Yeah? Plastic to transport, plastic to conserve, and then you can think of green chemistry as a breakthrough technology, because it would use less resources, it would use less energy, it would be less toxic, all of those qualities that you want in the long term. And a big company like Coca-Cola has invested in this. Now my message is not that I think that sugar beverages are a sustainable future. I'm talking about the bottle, not about the content. Yeah? Where this is the type of bottle that is degradable. It's a very different type of bottle that can be recycled in principle endlessly, one could say. So it's a very different approach. This would not end up in the same way in the ocean. And of course, there is another project. This is a picture from a Slovenian company that is working with plastics litter. And they are actually reproducing nets for the food industry, for fisheries, and a lot of our caloric intake on this planet is increasingly coming also from the sea. So there is a connection between what they do with waste, the food system, and then down the line with resource efficiency, circular economy, and those types of things. So a more circular approach to things. Then we have the transport system, where of course seas and oceans are important. In volume, about 80% of the global trade goes over sea routes. 70% of the value of global trade. Imagine that. It's humongous, it's huge. It has an impact on the environment because of greenhouse gas emissions, because of litter, of waste. And in principle, this is mostly illegal. But as we know, on the high seas, there is very little sovereignty and very little compliance mechanism. So it ends up in the sea. Or the facilities that we foresee in Europe under a directive from the year 2000, where every port needs to have a facility to receive litter, but this will be reviewed because it's not terribly efficient, it's not terribly harmonized, so there are issues there. And we need to reflect on how we can make this whole moving around of goods more sustainable. Going from, do we really need a t-shirt to go 3 times around the world before it ends up for €9.67 in some store, the driver, yeah, to when we move it around, with what type of energy, with what type of impact on the environment. And of course there are breakthroughs. The International Maritime Organization calculates that about 75% cuts in greenhouse gas emissions are possible, and that's not even counting the real, sort of innovative ideas, either in a sort of, I would almost say, romantic fashion or in a very high-tech, innovative fashion. Okay. Yeah, this is high-tech. Yeah. Okay. The urban system, of course, wastewater treatment and management have a huge impact on what in the end ends up in the sea. So the way we deal with that, the innovation there, the extent to which we can channel wastewater to plants, whether they are high-tech and large, massive in scale, or very small scale, what we can retain there, but also not retain, and that's obviously linked to microplastics and that sort of issue, will to a large extent determine on what ends up in the sea. And we will become more and more urbanized, which in principle can lead to resource efficiencies, but it also leads to a high concentration of potentially unsustainable practices of consumption and production. Okay, but there is more than that. Out of the box maybe a bit, financial innovation or innovation in the financial system, green bonds, blue bonds, which have a sort of very clear link to investing in types of industries, in types of technologies, in business that is not supporting the linear model, that is not leading to actual pressures on the environment. But there are other innovations in the financial system. Who would have thought 5 years ago that we would be studying the divestment movement? Yeah. I don't think anybody would have thought that in the same way. Who would have thought that we are actually putting a lot of the subsidy systems so high on the political agenda? Yeah? These are all linked to unsustainable systems of production and consumption. And the recent work that we have been doing is actually picked up by financial institutions. Our report was presented in the European Investment Bank. Yeah? I don't think that would have been the case 10 years ago, that the European Environment Agency would go to the investment bank to actually talk about natural capital, and not only about financial capital. There are breakthroughs in core elements of the system that will lead probably or hopefully to more sustainability. Now, the marine litter issue, I think, is a very visible aspect of this unsustainable set of systems of production and consumption. And in our type of report and work, we make a very clear distinction between the remedial approach to this, which I think is necessary at the moment because there's too much of the litter out there and too much litter on land also. So we need to do something about it remedially. But it's much more important to think in the long term about systemic transitions that will prevent that type of work that we have to do in cleaning up the mess. One of the elements that we actually need there, and I think that the project that is presented today is highly important for that reason alone, is that we are dealing with an environment, a marine environment, where knowledge is lacking in many, many different ways. I mean, I sometimes compare it to the oceans to a cave that you enter with 4 little tea candles and you try to make sense of it. We don't know a lot about the oceans and about the sea, so research on how this is functioning and how it is related to the core systems which we have as human beings, as society, I think is incredibly relevant. And one of the things we are doing, and actually the colleague who is the brain behind this and who does that is Constanza Belchor, and she's sitting here in the first row, so I can take no credit for this, is that we've been designing the Marine Litter Watch app. And it's more than an app. It's connected to a platform, and it's connected to the legal basis of it, the European legal basis. So we are gathering information together with citizens and groups who decide to walk along a piece of beach in Europe and gather dirt, trash, litter, waste as a proxy for what is in the ocean. And in that way, we are trying to engage with people. I've done it with my family. And I mean, it was very much sort of, wow. I mean, we never knew so much ended up on our beach. But we actually gather information that you could not gather in many other ways, because very few governments in Europe today are willing to send their public officials on the beach to pick up little pieces of plastic and then count them. And so this is a new way of gathering information that is engaging, and we use it in different ways to provide and strengthen the knowledge base on marine litter. Indeed. There have been about 570 cleanup events with more than 360,000 items collected, and you see where it has taken place. I would say this is quite impressive, but there is a big scope for more data gathering there, for more engagement, for more local movements to do this type of work. I can highly recommend it. Do it with your friends, with your family, with your organization. It's very rewarding and eye-opening. Yeah. I'm nearing the end of the talk, because what, and this will close the circle, circular economy, circular talk. What are the top items that we gather on the beach through, and what do we know? Well, cigarette butts and filters. We can go down plastic pieces, shopping bags, crisp packets and sweets, wrappers, all sorts of stuff. And actually most of the stuff is related to either the food system, and not always to the most healthy foods, I might say. There are other elements of unsustainability in the food system, all the fat, sugar and salt that is added to nearly everything that we buy in the store, for example. It's also closely linked to the housing system, because it's amazing how much building material in some way, shape or form ends up on the beach, and to the transport and mobility system. So these little items are actually the end, the tail end of these systems and the way in which we have organized them, or one could say disorganized them. So, land and sea closely connected through these systems. And if we look at global plastic production and total plastic waste, and then coastal areas, and what ends up in the ocean. And by the way, when I was preparing this with Costanza, I said, that last number there, between 6,350 metric tons of massive plastic waste and 245,000, that's a broad span, yeah? Yes, it is. But it illustrates that there is a ton, pun intended, of knowledge that we still need to gather, besides gathering the plastic, to understand what is going on in our oceans. So there is a big work that needs to be done. But it's clear that the real innovation is here. Yeah? The real innovation is here. The real innovation is probably not there, and inventing vacuum cleaners, so to speak, to get the plastic out of the ocean. That needs to happen, don't get me wrong. We need to deal with the waste. But the real innovation in the long term is there. That's where we need to go, I think. A lot of this type of knowledge we brought together in the first European Seas report, State of Europe Seas, that we brought out earlier this year, where the key messages are the way that we use the natural capital today in Europe is definitely not sustainable. Yeah? Our oceans and our European seas are not in good shape. They're not even in halfway good shape. They are in bad shape when it comes to ecosystemic qualities. The policy ambitions for the maritime use are not aligned with the clean, healthy and productive seas, which should be the driving force of the policy. The blue economy, of which we talk now, and in essence, let me say the following thing. If you want a blue economy that is strong, you need strong blue. Yeah? If you want a strong green economy, you need strong green. nature-based solutions, a term that you hear all the time now, it's a complete illusion to think that you can have strong solutions based on weak nature, right? We will need strong nature to have strong nature-based solutions. And you cannot do that on a degrading natural capital base. That is clear. It's true for the terrestrial ecosystem. It's true for the blue ecosystem. Yeah? Ecosystem-based management, therefore, we think is the way forward. Not a sort of piecemeal approach, but much more sort of understanding of what the systemic elements are. And in order to do that, we think that we need more of a sort of constituency, a movement around the value of seas and oceans and how this relates to the more systemic questions. I will leave it at that. I know that I was not probably focused as much on seas and oceans as you would have thought, but I hope it frames the sort of debate in the way that we are trying to contribute to protecting this most valuable piece of natural capital for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here comes a challenge, because I'm convinced that we have at least 250 bright, intelligent, and enthusiastic people in this room. And still I only have, and so if you count this up, we'll probably have like 600 questions. I only have time for 1 or 2. So the people that had a very short but nice discussion in 1 minute, that say, okay, Lars, you have to come over here because we want to ask a question to Hans. They'll have to make themselves noticed right now. So, yeah, oh, that's a woohoo. I'll go for the woohoo. So, Hans, please, I'll have to pass our youngest audience member here. He already was heard from. The woohoo came over here. So, who do we have the pleasure with?
I am Pedro from Stichting Clean. I would like to know why you count only on the beaches and not in the cities and on the land.
Because
as far as I know, 80% of what ends up in sea comes from the country. So why not count in the country?
we do that. We have very good statistics on waste across Europe, on waste gathering, waste streams, recycling rates, methods. We do this together with Eurostat. But when it came to marine litter, we didn't have that. It was a very disparate set of information that we had there, no consistency. And so what we try to do is to use what ends up on the beach as a proxy, as an indicator of what is out there in the ocean. Yeah. And we designed an app to tap into the new wave of, you could say, citizen science and citizen engagement to gather this type of information.
We saw the app, Hans, and a lot of people are already with their smartphone in their hands, right? It's a 2.0 event. So please also download this app. And Hans, does it work on any location? So to come to the question of the, if I would be on the shores of the Ei here, close by, could I also do a measurement? And,
yes, because the geo-positioning is in your mobile phone.
Yeah.
So you walk a distance. Of course, we know what distance it is because it ends up in our database. You gather, the way to do it is you take plastic bags, plastic gloves, you gather all the stuff, and then you sort it out, you count it, and you do the inputs in the database.
Because we have the sides.
It ends up in our database.
The sides of the rivers. We have the.
Yes, but if don't do this walking in the forest, okay? Because then you screw up our database. You know? It's called Marine Litter Watch, not Forest Litter Watch.
Don't screw up the database, please.
I'm sorry for the language.
I just said it like that, so that's okay. Okay, obviously we need and want to talk a little bit more. This gentleman is always standing on his chair, but this is what we want to create today, is to get the discussion going on. But I don't want to run out of time, because as a moderator I take my profession seriously as well. So I want to invite people, if you're still with us during the break and for the rest of the event, ask your questions at Hans, or share your initiatives, because I also saw your bag of plastic over there. So there are a great amount of organizations here already busy with cleaning up, or also there's supposed to be a surfboard in the audience somewhere, and the man who made it wants it back at the end. So I don't know where it is now. Where's the surfboard? It's made out of plastic, plastic bottles? Where is it? Is it somewhere? As long as it, just give it, hand it over to other people to see. Yeah, there's the surfboard. It's still there. Okay. Thank you very much, Hans BRUYNINCKX, for your contribution.
Hi, my name's Andrew Watts from the University of Exeter, and I'm going to talk to you about plastics, chemicals, and food webs. So, as Heather has already mentioned, plastic forms most of our marine litter that is getting into our marine environment. And this is just a few examples of plastic, things that we use in our everyday lives, plastic bottles, bags, polystyrene cups, also things that last a little bit longer, like toys and all of the technological advances that has come about by plastic. We also put plastic in our face washes. Here's a couple of examples of products that have plastics in them. Also, as Hans has also mentioned as well, plastic is getting onto our beaches in our marine environment. Here is a bottle top, which I found on a beach in the UK, squashed in between a couple of pebbles. And we also know that they are being ingested by seabirds and being entangled by other animals as well. But also it doesn't stop there. It's not just about large pieces of plastic. It's also about the small bits of plastic, the bits of plastic in face washes, as I said, but also this big plastic is also breaking down into something that we call microplastic. Now, Myra, my colleague, is going to be talking to you about how this happens in the next talk, but I just want to give you the final examples of microplastic. Now, these are some microplastics which I have blown up on a microscope. This bar here is about the thickness of a human hair, so you can tell actually how small they are. And they come in various shapes and sizes. So you've got these ones here, which are nice and long and really rough. You've got these ones, which are nice and round. These two come from face washes. But then also you've got this thing that's called secondary microplastic, which is the microplastic that has been broken down by this larger plastic. And here's a couple of examples of plastic like this, and even smaller. This is polyamide, that one. However, plastic is not just plastic. It's not just the polymer that they make the plastic out of. So, for example, PVC, 50% of it is plastic, but 50% of it is other chemicals. Now, the manufacturers put chemicals into plastic to create different properties, so making it bendy, making it rigid, making it see-through, different dyes that they have in. Now, because they're putting this in, and it's not forming the backbone of the plastic, these also will leach out when they get into the seawater. So, for example, we have dyes and stabilizers and plasticides, other technical names for these chemicals which are coming out of these plastics into the marine environment. And we've done some studies at CleanSea to look at the rate of these chemicals coming out of these plastics. And these are then getting into animals and having various harmful effects. But also, we're not just getting chemicals coming out of the plastics, we're getting chemicals coming onto the plastics. So we're having things like persistent organic pollutants. We are having pesticides, PCBs, chemicals like that are absorbing onto these plastics. Now, these chemicals are floating around our marine environment anyway, but they're floating around in a very dilute form. Now, as plastic passes through these chemicals, the chemicals are attracted to the plastic, taking these chemicals further away from the point of origin. We've also seen bacteria and other things like that attaching to chemicals and taking those to places where we wouldn't see them in the water or in the sediment. This then means that we're moving pathogens from one place to another. These are getting consumed by animals that we are then consuming or other animals are consuming, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Therefore creating other issues, not just of the plastic. So at CleanSea, we took a multi-organism approach. We looked at some animals and we looked at some plants to look at different aspects of the effect that plastic is having. So we've started with the lowest level of the food chain, the macroalgae, and we were looking at the effects it has on production, and Myra is going to be talking about that in a second, about uptake in things like fish and seabirds. And I quickly want to just talk to you about this term called trophic transfer. So this is the transfer of plastics from one organism to another. So it's not that the crabs, for example, here are consuming plastic from the environment. They're actually consuming it from these mussels. Now, mussels are filter feeders. Therefore, they can consume a huge amount of water and anything that's in there. And we have found that plastics can stay into mussels for over 2 months, residing in their tissues. And we've shown that they get into crabs as well. So here's an example of a little microsphere attached to the inside of the crab gut. These are staying in there for over a month. Also, what we saw was when we actually fed them mussels with fibers in them, so from fishing rope. What you can see here, this is the rope fibers that we put into the food. These are the rope fibers that we got into the gut, out of the gut, and these are the ones that came out of the fecal pellets. So you can quite easily see that these plastics are actually degrading actually in the animal. Now, this is not anything that we knew before the CleanSea project. This is a brand new piece of work that we've found. But also, very quickly, what we found is that there is not just the root uptake of feeding, but we were finding plastics on the gills of these crabs. So crabs take in water like mussels to breathe through the base of their legs, and they're actually filtering plastics out. So as we are looking at solutions and looking at uptake routes of plastics into animals, we need to consider the whole biology of the animals. So here I'm going to finish and pass on to my colleague Myra, and she's going to be talking a little bit more about this kind of degradation in the environment and its effects.
Yeah, so I am Myra. I work at Deltaris in Delft. And one of the main questions we had within the CleanSea project was, once plastics enter into the marine environment, what happens to them? We know that they break down into smaller pieces, but this process has not yet been very well studied. So we decided to do an experiment. We went outside to the North Sea and collected about 350 liters of North Sea water containing microorganisms, and we put that into this big tank in one of our laboratories. And then we started building our own artificial plastic soup. So we put some balloons in there, some plastic cups, but also the more compostable plastics. And the question was, what would happen to these plastics over time as we expose them to mechanical stresses, but also UV light to simulate the conditions in the field? And this is actually what happens to a compostable trash bag. So at day 0, you can see that this is still something that you would happily put your trash in. But already after about 2 months, small holes start to appear. And after 183 days, it would be very unwise to put your trash in this bag. So this breakdown is a result of two processes. On the one hand, you have fragmentation, which is caused by the mechanical stress, which is pieces breaking into smaller pieces. And on the other hand, you have these microorganisms that actually degrade the plastics into smaller elements. If we then further try to quantify this, we looked at weight loss of plastics. So what you can see here is a graph with all the with our artificial plastic soup on the x-axis. So you see the different kinds of plastics that we used in the experiment. And on the y-axis, you see the percentage of weight loss per year. So we also have different categories of plastics. You see the green bars, which represent the more bio-based plastics. And then you have the red bars, which are the plastics that have a very strong carbon skeleton. So the atoms are very strongly attached to each other. And then you have the blue bars, which have also a bit more traditional plastics, but with a slightly weaker atomical bond. And what you can see, if we go back to our compostable trash bag, is that it actually loses more than 25% of its original weight per year. And this is quite a lot, especially if you compare it to, for example, polystyrene packaging foam, which only loses about 2% of its original weight. And what this means, actually, this breakdown, is that probably there will be smaller particles being created. But these have not yet been measured. They're still waiting analysis in the project. And what we can learn from this graph is that plastics break down, but the rate at which they break down is different per type of plastic material. From Andy's talk, we've learned that microplastics can have an effect on marine organisms. And a very important marine organism is the algae. It's kind of the grass of the ocean, if you will. It not only forms the basis of the food chain, but it is also important for humans because it produces oxygen. Now, in CleanSea, we studied these algae. We exposed microalgae to high concentrations of microplastics of different sizes, and we actually found that there were effects on the production of these algae, and also that these effects were larger if the particles were smaller. Now, models are a way of understanding processes in the marine environment. With the algae, we did model runs based on the CleanSea experiment, but actually the model runs, they resulted in the effect that microplastics effects on these algae were negligible. So we went one step higher in the food web. We looked at zooplankton. And zooplankton are very small invertebrates that are floating around freely in the upper water column and so can be seen from the surface. So what you see here is a model output of one of these runs. So we have here the North Sea, as you can hopefully recognize. So we are in Amsterdam, obviously. And this shows the impact that microplastics have on the zooplankton biomass and production. So it may be a bit counterintuitive, but actually here blue, the color blue, signifies a higher impact. So what you can see is that the areas that are mostly affected in terms of zooplankton by microplastics are the blue areas that are quite far off the coast. Now, what this means is that there is less food available for fish and other consumers that are feeding on the zooplankton. Now, future research will focus on what this actually means for the consumers higher up in the food chain, but also what this means for the ecosystem. And then I'd like to finalize with a few take-home messages. So the first thing is, okay, we have quantified, we've tried to quantify, and we're working to better understand how these plastics break down and what rate and what processes. And also, we've learned that this depends on the type of plastic material that you find in the environment. And then secondly, we've learned that microplastics may potentially affect the ecosystem. and especially on the basis of the food web. I'm going to give the floor now to Ghada, who will talk a bit more about another kind of model that we have used within the CleanSea project. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ghada. Where do the plastics that we are talking about would end up? Thank you. Where would that end up? And why do we want to know? Of course, we cannot measure everywhere. So we use yet another model to simulate and predict the accumulation zones. So in the marine environment, the water movement is governed by wind, by waves. Then you have the circulation, the flow field. The seasonal variability is governed by the salinity. So the salinity, you have salinity fronts, you have temperature. All of those are governing the movement of the water. The plastics, or the marine litter, in that case, plastics, are actually moving into the oceans and the seas according to this circulation. They end up in something called accumulation zones. Those accumulation zones are very important to identify because they are potentially high-risk hotspots for the marine organism. That's why we use the models actually to simulate this and to predict the accumulation zones. So in that case, if we discharge plastics in the river as river inputs, because the rivers are an important pathway for the plastic, then they circulate with this circulation. They end up mainly along the coast and in other areas of accumulation zone. Of course, they settle, they move according to their sizes and densities, and when at rough situation, conditions, rough weather conditions, they end up again at the top, and finally, when there is calm weather, they end up in the sediment. This circulation of the model, I do not know if this is working or not. So this circulation can be captured by the model, and then those accumulation points are being identified. The settling velocity. So the settling and the resuspension, as I said, this has been taken into account into the model. So we are trying actually to capture the natural variability of the plastics into the model. So we assign different sizes, we assign different densities. And according to those, the plastic particles settle down to the sediment, or they are suspended again with the rough conditions, as I said. We have also, Myra have mentioned the plastic soup and the experiments that we have done in the lab. And from this, the fragmentation, as we have seen it, that the sizes of the plastic is being subdivided into tiny ones. Well, this has been also accounted into the model. So what we were trying actually to capture with this model, to try to put the maximum physics that we can put to drive the plastics around, and also in the vertical, and also to have the characteristics and the natural variability of the plastics that we normally see when we go for the measurements. So what we have also discovered with this model, or the model was always looking at the sediments at all layers, so not only at the water column, but the sediment. And we have actually, the model was giving us the sign and the data in that way, that most of this concentration of the plastic is happening in the sediment. So we have actually generated within CleanSea a lot of measurements, a lot of information, not only to put it into the model or to drive the model, but also to understand what's happening in the nature out there, and to validate our model, because we are assuming that this model is predicting all of the North Sea in that case. So the river input was one of the things that we have measured, and we have actually looked at the screening of an amount of water in the rivers, and then we check what we have And this is a measure of how much is coming from the rivers into the marine system. We have also looked out there in the marine, in the seas, in the sediment, in the bed of the sea. So there were fishing for litter. We're also having cross-sections along the sea, screening and sweeping the bottom of the sea. And this is what we find. All of this information has been actually generated within CleanSea. Moreover, also at specific point, scattered points at the mouth of the river, the sediment, the plastics in the sediment has been measured. Also, from other scattered points in the North Sea, there have been surveys to have measurement of the concentration of the plastics in the water column and in the sediment. All of this information have been an input to the model and used for model validation. So as a summary, why do we want to know? We would like to identify those accumulation zones or the hotspots because they are a risk to the marine organism. What we would like also to know is that with this prediction of accumulation zone, we can have guided monitoring. So we tell people out there where to go and when to go and what to look for, at the surface or at the bottom. This can help and support targeting cleanup actions, but also policy measures, as Hans was saying today. As messages, using models in that way is a first step towards a description, a full description of marine litter. It is a very generic model. It can be deployed in any other regional sea. The simulation showed for the North Sea that most of the plastics are along the beaches, and this is a proxy for cleanup actions, what's happening in the marine. Finally, the accumulation zones were mainly in the sediment more than in the surface. Therese here is going to expand on the monitoring and the analysis. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Therese. Researchers all over the world are using innovative, state-of-the-art methods to measure microlitter. And thanks to this, we know today that our current consumption patterns leave global, widespread traces. But we're also seeing a rising global will to change this. And we're asked, what can we do? My colleagues on the second part will go deeper into different solutions that we have for these problems. But I've also found that this question actually puts a spotlight on a few of the current gaps in the knowledge that we have. Such as, how much is there? How much is it over here compared to here? What kind is there? And is it different now from 2 years ago? We can get an estimate from the data that we have already collected so far. But in order to answer these questions more in depth, we need to be able to do more precise measurements. And we want to answer these questions in order to create baseline values, to make risk assessments, and also to start mapping out sources. So within the CleanSea project, we've been working with different method developments. And we wanted to start at the start with sampling. So we created this pump. It's a filter system with different kinds of filters with different sizes to look at microlitter. With this pump, our thinking was that we wanted to get a precise measurement of volume. We also wanted to minimize microlitter loss and avoid contamination, so all parts are made in metal. Additionally, we wanted to be able to measure at different depths, looking at different sizes. As you understand, these are a lot of requests to put on one sampling device. And we've had a few bumps on the road, or rather at sea. But our final tests show really good, sorry about that. Our final tests show good result for these methods. And it also shows that we seem to get slightly higher results when using this pump compared to traditional methods such as trawling. So once we've sampled, we needed methods for extracting the microlitter. And as you've already heard, microlitter is a very diverse material. It comes in different shapes, sizes, densities. So we wanted to be able to look at different environmental matrices, including sediment and biota. So we've tested a set of different kinds of methods, and we found that below 300 micrometers, which is tiny, tiny, it became harder and harder to actually recover all of the microlitter if we put in to test our methods. But through testing these different methods, we found ways to get good recoveries and to avoid contamination. And sometimes the methods were really, the solutions were really technical. Sometimes it was enough to just add 1 drop of olive oil. Then we reached one crucial step, identification. The first time that I was going to measure a sample, I got a microscope and I sat down and I was told, just count the plastic. The samples could look something like this. Of course, with time, you learn that the way that the breaking points look or the way that the fiber coils can tell you so much about the material. But I probably had to redo my first 10 samples or so. And today, if I compare to a colleague, our counts will still differ. Because of this, it's becoming increasingly common to couple visual identification with spectroscopic identification. This is still done on a particle-by-particle basis. And we wanted to see if we could tie a little bit different take on it. So we would use hyperspectral imaging. The principle of this is that we took our samples, we put it in a special kind of camera. From this camera, you get a picture with an X and a Y axis and a certain set of pixels. For each pixel, you also got a spectra. Through comparing this spectra to different references, we can then say what kind of material is within that pixel in our image. This generates huge sets of data. So in order to manage this, we would use different statistics methods and multivariate data analysis. What you see here behind me is a PCA plot which shows you the clustering and the grouping of different kinds of material. And this would create a more objective and kind of semi-automatic way of measuring microlitter. In our setup for this method, we would use a 300 micrometers as the lower size limit. But in reality, the limitations of this is mostly based on what kind of spatial and what kind of spectral resolution that you have. So you could zoom in and look at smaller pieces in a smaller area, or you could zoom out and you could look at bigger pieces in a larger area. While we've been testing all of these methods, we've learned a few things and had a few things confirmed about microlitter. One is, it's a very diverse material. And this is really important to keep in mind when you're designing your research question or your experiment, because there's no perfect method. For example, there are still size fractions that we can't quantify. And even for the kinds of litter that we can quantify, there's no one-size-fits-all method. And for whatever method you choose, it's important to assess both the contamination and the recovery of microlitter. We have also, through looking at these different methods, realized that we are likely still underestimating the amounts of microlitter in the ocean, especially since there are still fractions and particles that we just can't measure yet.
Thank you very much.
So I'm Dari, for short. I come from Denkstadt, and I'm going to present on the economic sense behind shrinkers from marine litter. We have seen that marine litter could cause a wide range of environmental impacts, not always visible to the eye, difficult to track or measure. But marine litter also has another face. It arises from market failure, where costs, social and economic, are occurred by society. For example, littering could affect adversely the beach visitors by depriving them from recreation benefits or even posing health risks. Marine litter could also damage the local and national economy by having a negative impact on revenues, resulting in huge losses for both public and private actors, for example, the tourism, shipping industry, coastal municipalities. So this cost, or the cost of marine litter, the cost of marine litter are usually borne not by the polluters themselves. So there is the question, who pays and how much? For example, the fishery sector could experience losses that amount to billions of euros due to the presence of plastic in the environment. I would like to take you on a short journey to explore together the socioeconomic costs of marine litter. Our first stop are 10 coastal municipalities located in the Netherlands and Italy, where we collected data on cleanup costs, litter type, amounts of beach litter, practices that they use. What we found out is that results are hugely varying from one place to another place, even in one and the same country. For example, the amount of a litter in the Netherlands could vary from 6 to more than 100 tons per kilometers. The same applies to the annual costs. Going to Italy, we noticed that there are higher values for the amount of beach litter and the annual cleanup costs. So it's a bit strange, don't you think? Well, there are a number of possible explanations of this. For example, these results could be impacted by the number of visitors, by the length of the coastline, by the manner of measurement. For example, in Italy, measurement of beach litter happens before sand removal. There is one clear message here that I would like to convey, and this is that there is a need for a harmonized monitoring system so that we have the data, reliable and consistent, to be able to design and develop cost-effective measures. From Italy, we go to Spain, where another actor is facing the challenges of marine litter. We worked together with the Port of Barcelona, where we collected and analyzed floating litter in the area of the port. We found out that in this area, the concentration of marine litter is really, really high compared to the average for the whole sea. We also found out that the costs are really high, as reported by the authorities. There is one thing that we should be aware of, and this is that the Port of Barcelona is a rather busy port. More than 9,000 cruise passengers arrive at this port every day. The city of Barcelona is also very famous among the tourists. more than 15,000 tourists come to this city. The amount of litter that we looked at consisted mainly of single-use products, which points to the fact that recreational activities and tourism are among the main contributors to the problem in this area. So having all these costs comes to the question, well, if it's so costly, why clean it all? Can't we just leave it there? Well, to find out, we looked on the demand for a clean environment. We did a survey in 3 countries, in 3 European marine regions, where we asked more than 700 interviewees on their perception of the impact of littering on their beach experience, on their willingness to contribute to cleanup activities in ours, and also on their willingness to pay additionally as an entrance fee or, for example, a tax to clean up the beach. What we found out is that plastic bottles and cigarette butts are the most common type of litter as perceived by the visitors. Also, in every country, visitors were really annoyed by the presence of litter, and this was especially true for Greece, when more than 90% of the people said, oh, we are really annoyed, we don't want this thing. Interestingly, we recorded the higher willingness to pay both in Bulgaria and in the Netherlands. We also noticed that visitors are willing to pay for items that they feel responsible for, such as plastic bags or bottles, etc. And less responsible and less willing to pay for items that are washed on the shore, such as the fish nets and rolls, but these are still there. So what is there to take home? Marine litter costs are high and highly varying, but as already mentioned, these are necessary. To clean up is really important so that we maintain the static value of the coastal environment. Also, costs of marine litter could be disproportional to different actors. There is a significant loss in welfare due to the presence of marine litter. And it's also a good thing that there is a public willingness to contribute to solve this problem. Engaging volunteers, of course, could reduce the costs, improve awareness. But there is also this other perspective, that marine litter is an unavoidable cost. Focusing more on prevention and the use of versatile economic instruments could help us be more successful in tackling this problem. How are we gonna achieve this? I now give the floor to Pedro, who is going to tell a little bit more about it.
My name is Pedro FERNÁNDEZ. I work at the EUCC Mediterranean Center in Spain, and we are going to talk a little bit more about economy. This time we are not going to talk about the cost of the economic cost of marine litter, but how can economics indeed contribute to fighting against marine litter. First of all, I would like to recall a little bit the system we are living in. This is very important when we try to find solutions from the economics perspective. It is a linear economy, and that means that we are taking resources, we are manufacturing in the factories, of course, and then consumers, we are using them, we dispose them, sometimes not really correctly, and then they can become marine litter. So this is the model we live in, and that's why it's a very important origin for marine litter. Another important aspect, as Dariya was explaining, is that we have externalities coming from this system. There are producers and consumers that they are generating this marine litter and they are not paying for that. So it's the entire society, the environment, paying for that. This is an externality. And here economic instruments can support internalizing this cost. So the people producing, and producers, consumers, and so on, producing the problem will be responsible for the solution. Another thing, and I think we all agree on that, is that this economic system we live in is not going to solve the problem of marine litter on its own. We are going to have very innovative ideas, courageous actions to solve this problem. However, I think we have good news, and it's like within this system we still can apply economic instruments that can prevent marine litter. And to do this, I'm going to take one example. And this is the plastic bottle. So this plastic bottle is indeed a container. It is not a product. It's a container for a product which is water. It was designed only to be used one time. And that's why this is one of the main reasons we can find it very often on our beaches and in the sea. What can we do from the point of view of economics? We can intervene at the top of the level of the cycle, at the design and production. We could give incentives to industry, some funding to research and develop new materials, biodegradable materials, as we heard this morning with the case of Coca-Cola. We could also use another instrument, which is the Eco-Design Awards, and the support, for example, that these kind of products, that they are made to be used more than one time, they could get a better position in the market when we are having awards. We can also intervene at the level of the users, and this is very important. For example, in one country like the Netherlands, where we are, if I do this, I could get a fine of 140 euros. So I'd rather pick it up quickly. I hope nobody saw it. I always pick it up. So this is also an economic instrument. So me, because I don't want to lose that money, I won't do it. And then you are interfering with the consumer behavior. Another thing we can do about that is about in the collection phase. We can apply a deposit refund scheme to this kind of product. Then we are giving a value to the container, and then we will make sure as consumer that we are going to get our deposit back. So then we are going to dispose it correctly in the magazines, in the stores. Also, it's very important for recycling. Where we are doing that, we are separating in a correct manner. We are getting a very high quality material that it could be recycled in high quality products. And finally, at the bottom of the cycle, we have the cleanup. We can even fund some NGOs for the cleanups. That's an economic incentive for people. It's a lot about awareness, about cleanups, but they are also contributing to clean up our beaches and seas. Okay? So as you see, we have many opportunities within economics, and we have been looking at that not only for a plastic bottle, but for many other sectors. So here you can see some of the economic instruments we have been looking in CleanSea. We look at a total of 52 instruments all over Europe in the 4 marine regions. We have a wide variety of instruments addressing maritime transport, fisheries, day-to-day consumption, and so on. For example, the no special fee, that's a very important one for maritime transport. With this instrument, what we do is that vessels, they are encouraged to bring all the waste to the port facilities because they will pay the same amount. No matter whether they are discharging or not, they will pay the same amount. We also have pay-as-you-throw schemes and many other instruments. So with this, in CleanSea, we found key aspects. Of course, it will be more effective, the instrument, when we are addressing the key sources of this litter. We also know that when we apply them in a broad geographical scope, they will have a better effectiveness, and so on. So finally, the CleanSea messages we want to deliver today. We see a great opportunity to upscale some of the instruments. For example, the one I explained about the port reception facilities, there is a lot of opportunity to scale up, and then it should be applied in a coherent way at the regional sea level. Also very important to target design and production. There are some items like cigarette butts or cotton bud sticks where there are no economic instruments. And here we can do a lot about eco-design, for example, of course, with other many measures. Also, filling the gaps. We found quite some gaps, and for example, in the fisheries sector, we didn't really find economic incentives. And here, for example, we could apply a deposit refund scheme to fishing boxes and fishing nets. So then we will make sure that they are coming back to the port more often than they do. And finally, we think it's very important to keep on working on the evidence. So we have to show that they work, that they have a very good potential, but actually that they work in reality. They are working, and there is the opportunity to work much more with them. However, even economics has some limitations, and we are going to need a lot more from other sciences, from other willingness, and this is what we are going to hear next with Susanne. Thank you.
So my name is Susanne from Ecological Institute in Berlin, and I will talk about what can a policymaker make about marine litter. So we have a lot of EU legislation in place. Of course, there is the single and very new piece which is directly targeting marine litter. This is the MSFD, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And then we have also quite old directives already, which are linked to waste, land-based waste, and also freshwater litter, for instance. And they are also linked to our waste hierarchy. For instance, the packaging directive is directly linked to the highest stage of the hierarchy, the most important stage, the prevention stage. Still, we discovered a lot of gaps in this legal system, and we tried to outline first solutions. Additionally, we screened existing measures in all 4 sea regions, more than 100 measures, which are legislative, which is regulatory, like laws, but also audits, impact assessments, and on the other hand, we also targeted measures which are co-management measures, like cooperative measures, awareness-raising campaigns, etc. This was backed, this exercise, by 16 CleanSea stakeholder workshops in all 4 sea regions, and we gathered a lot of information, suggestions from experts of different sectors like fisheries, maritime sector, and also NGOs, administration, and research. One result of this exercise is the targeting of these existing planned measures of the product life cycle. So, what you can see is the answer of the different sea regions to the product life cycle. So there exist a lot of measures, and they are linked to the different stages of the product life cycle, like the design and production stage, the consumption and use stage, which is the light green stage. And so far, in the center, you see the ideal product life cycle, which we learned more about from Pedro already. So the green bar shows the most important stages for real circular economy, for a real product life cycle. So we have to really target actually the prevention side. Actually, if you have a quick look to the 4 graphs in the 4 regions, you see there's quite a lot of imbalance. There's no real picture of such an ideal product life cycle. Instead, and sometimes it's the opposite way around, that you have far more clean-up measures than prevention measures. And additionally, we also assessed the planned program of measures of the member states and the regional action plans related to marine litter of the sea conventions, which is shown here in a dotted color. You see here, these are these planned measures. And still, there is a quite unbalanced picture. To be more general, you can draw conclusions about the main gaps. Of course, we have a quite fragmented legal system, and we are not really targeting marine litter within the legislation. Further, we have a quite insufficient focus on the first most important stages of the life cycle stage. That's, as said, the design production level and the consumption and use stage. So this is a main gap we observed during our studies. And of course, we also have a lack of proper implementation of laws, legislation, and a proper enforcement, which currently can be seen on thousands of infringements, for instance, of the Waste Framework Directive and the Landfill Directive. Last but not least, we have already quite nice legal principles in place. Hans mentioned the ecosystem approach. We have a polluter pays principle and also precautionary principle, but they are quite theoretical. They are always mentioned in lots of action plans, but they are not putting to life. They are not really implemented. Another important issue we want to stress here is that the impact of environmental legislation is more related to the design feature of an instrument than the type of an instrument. So in our view, we have key success factors for legislation related to marine litter, and some of them are here in the center, like coherence, predictability, and of course the possibility to monitor compliance and to observe non-compliance immediately. Also the strict enforcement supported by penalties and prosecution. And of course, then a good combination, a clever combination of different instruments, other instruments like economical instruments or voluntary instruments. What can a policymaker do now? We heard that we have a systemic problem. How to deal with this really underlying problem of behavior change, of ideas which are not really mentioned yet, degrowth and so on. Transition was mentioned. So in CleanSea, we weren't really able to go to the real ground of the whole problem, but we tried to at least assess these hundreds of measures and provide some first packages and opportunities of measures to policymakers, which they can use then for their regional needs and adapt them within their geographical scope. So, for instance, the most important stage, the design and production stage, could be tackled by eco-design regulations. And also the ban of certain items in sensitive areas. The use and consumption can be tackled by eco-labeling to foster and force consumer behavior to bring them in the right direction, which is also relevant for companies. And they're also quite neglected stage in many countries in the EU. The recycling and reuse stage should be tackled by more measures which are really supporting recycling, recyclability, instead of incineration. And if incineration, then only those hazardous plastics or plastics which are not reusable anymore. To sum up, here are the main CleanSea messages I want to bring forward. And you can see innovation is one of the main topics we really have to focus. And we should support SMEs who are developing marine-friendly products. And maybe not plastic biodegradables, as we can learn from the last UNEP study. We have to put our legal principles in place and upscale the good practices we have to other regions. So just use the CleanSea report and create your own box of measures. Support collaboration between all levels of governance to support capacity building and information exchange. Integrate marine litter, mainstream existing legislation as maybe planned for the Water Framework Directive, and to integrate marine litter issues. So mainstream existing legislation and at the same time create new legislation focusing on prevention. So use bans and penalties. And last but not least, break existing patterns of behavior. There are lots of measures in place as well. They are also related to voluntary measures, awareness-raising campaigns, and my colleague Agni will now go more into detail.
Right, so I'm the last speaker of today. I'm Agni, and
of this block,
of this
before
blog.
the break.
Oh, sorry for assuming so much importance of myself.
6 minutes left.
Yeah, vanity. I currently work at the University of Utrecht, but I did this research at the Free University of Amsterdam together with other colleagues. So I'm going to talk about some voluntary practices and why they work and under what conditions. So governments are not the only actors who try to address the challenge of marine litter. And in fact, we see the proliferation of a number of voluntary initiatives across all EU regional seas. And in this slide, you can see a number of examples. So a typical example is the beach cleaning activities that usually takes place before the tourists arrive. But we also find initiatives such as the fishing for litter, which includes cleaning up, but also awareness raising. Basically, fishing boats are provided with big bags, and then they collect the litter that they find at the marine environment. We have some initiatives that try to challenge our behavior, like, for instance, the repair cafes. I'm not sure if you have heard about them, but these are places that are run by local communities, and there you can go and repair your stuff instead of throwing them away. Basically, this is not something new. It's what our grandparents used to do, but it's perhaps new for us in the 21st century. And we also find some more institutionalized forms of cooperation, typically between central governments and businesses and or NGOs. Like in the Netherlands, we have the Green Deals, which is an agreement between the central Dutch government and a number of sectors, like the fishing sector or even the shipping sector, and they set certain targets and they try to achieve them together. Or we have the Couture Commitment, which is an initiative by retail chains in the UK under the framework of the UK government in order to reduce waste in their whole supply chains. So we have a number of these initiatives, and we can find them in all the EU regional seas. But as you can see from this graph, in some areas they are more prevalent than in others. or at least we were able to identify more in some areas than in others. And the area with the most of these initiatives is the Northeast Atlantic. And we shouldn't be surprised really by that, because this is an area where it has this tradition of voluntarism and entrepreneurship. In terms of what exactly they target, we see that they target the different stages of the waste hierarchy, but we find a lot in the awareness raising and beach cleaning, which are the more traditional ways of addressing this problem. But it's encouraging that we find also in the prevention and other stages that that's important. And in terms of who is behind them, here we also find different types of factors. Here you see slightly different numbers, and that is because some initiatives are present in many different countries, like the Fishing for Litter, which we counted as one initiative when we tried to identify who is behind them. So we see that civil society, and foundations, like the Plastic Soup Foundation or the North Sea Foundation, are behind many of those. But businesses are also behind many of those, like Marks and Spencer and supermarket chains. We find public actors initiating voluntary initiatives, and these are usually municipalities, so at the lower level of administration. And we also find hybrid nature initiatives. So these include cooperations between different types of actors. So we have all these initiatives in all these different areas, and the question is, why do they emerge in the first place? So there are different explanations for why they have emerged. One form of explanation is that governments are slow and ineffective. And so these type of initiatives fill in a kind of regulatory gap that is left by the governments. Then we have a second but similar type of explanation. This emphasizes the innovative nature of this type of initiatives. They are bottom-up, they are energetic, they are entrepreneurial, and so on. And they can address problems better than governments. And then you have a third set of explanation, which is a more critical. And from this perspective, scholars argue that basically it's a question of power. So if you have businesses regulating themselves, they gain power vis-a-vis the state. So our goal was not to find out who is right in this debate. And of course, if you are a neoliberal or if you are a Marxist, you're going to be convinced by different arguments. And as those of us in the room who are social scientists know very well, you can always find data that support one position or the other. But having said that, what we found in our project is that indeed governments may have not been as effective as we would have wanted them to be in addressing this problem, but we also did not find evidence to convince us that voluntary initiatives in their entirety constitute a panacea, that they are going to solve the problem magically and automatically. So this observation led us to ask ourselves, so under what conditions do voluntary initiatives live up to their promise? And we call them the ingredients of success. And we identified 5 of these conditions or 5 of these ingredients. And please look at them together. So there is no hierarchy of which one is more important than the other. So one condition is ambition. So we need to have ambitious voluntary initiatives. And this may seem like a very trivial observation. However, it's not trivial if you consider that the majority of these initiatives do not try to go beyond what governments are already trying to do, which is our definition of ambition. These initiatives may help governments to implement certain goals, but we also need them in order to push the frontier. And this is why they should be there in the first place. However, also in evaluating ambition, we should not forget that this is a relative concept. So what is ambitious in Bulgaria may not be considered ambitious in the Netherlands. or what is considered ambitious in the Netherlands may be over-ambitious in Bulgaria and therefore not be able to be implemented. Second condition is that we need monitoring, compliance, and accountability mechanisms for these initiatives. And that's a bit counter to their voluntary nature. And there is the assumption that peer pressure and reputation costs will do the goods. But these mechanisms work only when there is homogeneity among the actors, when there is proximity, and where there is visibility to the consumers. And so in the absence of these conditions, we need more formalized forms of overseeing and control. They need to attract a critical stakeholder mass. And of course, that's because they are voluntary. So nobody is obliged to participate. So the question is, what motivates actors to participate? And if you look at the traditional economic theories and even much of the political science research, the assumption is that actors are rational utility maximizers. So they calculate costs and benefits in a monetary way, and if the benefits outweigh the cost, they will participate. Now, what we found out in this research, and actually verifies research of others, is that we are much more complex than that. So we have things such as values, ethics, norms, etc. And these matter in the reasons why stakeholders participate. And we need to then research this complexity further. Fourth, and counterintuitively again, we found that voluntary initiatives work best when they are supported by governments. And this contradicts the neoliberal era that we now live in, that supposes that the state has no reason of existence, or we need only a minimal state, and therefore we need to dismantle it. In fact, we found that the best of these initiatives would not have been as best without support by governments. And finally, we need a level playing field. So in scaling up initiatives, we need, of course, more than a few good examples. We need to scale up, but we need to do that in a way that creates conditions across all regions and even within the regions of equal opportunities. Because otherwise, we end up with waste havens in regions that have less stringent environmental regulation, more economic problems, and in general, less opportunities. So these are our 5 ingredients of success.
In 30 seconds.
Our message is that marine litter is a political problem. It needs cooperation between different types of actors, and it requires from us to imagine and reinstitutionalize new norms. And so in order to do that, we need to bring back into the political discussion the role of ethics, the role of values, and even of emotions. Because marine litter is only a problem if we consider it a problem, if we feel disgusted by it, if we value beauty, and if we want to create pressure for change. And that's my last slide, final message.
They're almost going to attack you after 2 hours of sitting down, so make it short.
It's really, really very short, and it recaps, I hope, the whole presentation of this afternoon. What we need for an ecological future, I'm just going to read then this. For an ecological future, we need to create a different hierarchy of values, and we need to think about the economic and political system that can really support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
vento di grigo e di levanti, aria che spinge e acqua davanti, li conti di la terra pilumare, parole, voci e canti. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare navar che narriti che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare navar che narriti che sanno parlare. Vai amola e vai avanti, ai amola, ai amola, iamola, ai amola, ai amola, ai amola. Ai amore, vai avanti, ai amola, ai amola, iamola, ai amola, ai amola, ai amola. Gesù Cristo con i santi, ai amola, ai amola, iamola, ai amola, ai amola, ai amola. E criato sole e mari, ai amola, ai amola, iamola, ai amola, ai amola, ai amola. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. Gnanzo, 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 putiri gnanzo, gnanzo, putiri gnanzo, gnanzo, mezzo lo mare, gnanzo. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta di seta intrizzata, c'era la vita, la corda tagliata. C'era lo sole, c'era lo senso, c'era una donna e c'era l'inferno. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare. C'era una volta in mezzo lo mare, una barca in rete che sanno parlare.
Thank you very much. And obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to do a little bit of explaining because as you heard, well, most of you speak fluent Sicilian, right? But for those people in the audience that didn't quite get it, could you share with us? Because you had the inspiration, you told a little bit to me, there was a song that the fishermen sing. Which one was that?
Well, I speak here.
Yeah.
It was a combination of some little elements, and it's actually I have a show about the sea, and I research a lot of maritime heritage, and in this little composition. There are some evocation for the sea. There is some tuna fisherman songs. Actually, they sing together to have a rhythm during their work, but also to ask forgiveness to the sea for the violence that the men are doing to the fish, to her.
So
her,
what
I call it her.
Yeah.
The sea,
Well, taking out the fish.
to the
Yeah.
fish, yeah. And there is a kind of also a kind of motet where I combine some elements of tuna and sword fisherman elements, and I do like a rhythmic thing with my tambourine, which is my best friend.
Very nice. So thank you very much. And I really loved the way you started, because just by using the shelf, we were actually experiencing the ocean. So you have a show. If you want to see more, please look up this wonderful artist, Vincenzo CASTELLANA, and see more of his music, songs, and also the artistic tellings that he makes. We want to thank you very much, and because we are so thankful, you're going to hear the biggest applause yet. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's respect the sea, because sea is our blood. Blood. So.
So also to address our YouTube viewers, still a lot of people are following us through the stream. If you got any questions, please use a hashtag like CleanSea. We'll be able to find it. Also for the people that are on social media here, I put a link on social media with the Marine Litter Watch. So please be part of the research team, and let's collect data for the team of Hans and download that app. And so if you have any questions, use the hashtag CleanSea. I'll find it, or just address me on Twitter, and I'll be sure to pick up your questions for the next block. We're going to work with maybe some questions that came in during the debriefing here. Is there a couple that was discussing and a question came up? I said, Lars, maybe can we have a question? A hand went up very fast here. A threesome. Threesomes are happening over here. Please, who do we have the pleasure with?
I'm Magdalena Muir with Coastal and Marine Union. I'm the advisory board member climate. So it's a granular but also a biochemical issue. And what was pointed out by some people working actively in this area, that even the organic plastics or plant-based plastics we have now have the same issues or problems. So we need to look at the problems to find the solution, because it doesn't exist yet.
Right. And is this a question?
It's probably a consolidation of three persons' comments.
Right, okay, thank you. Okay, so that, because I was just wondering which researcher to go to. One more hand that I can address over there. Please stand up so I can find you more easy. Yes, I'm just going here. Yes, I never give away my microphone. You learn this when you do this a couple of times a year. So, who do we have the pleasure with here?
My name is Myra, and my company is called Blue O2. We're working on carbon offsetting based on sea plants. And I heard a little bit about the consequences of microplastics on marine animals, but since there are high concentrations in the sediment, I'm also very curious about the consequences for plants.
Which one of the researchers could give us a little bit more information about the risks for plants because of the microplastics in the sediment? Who's going to raise his hand on that? Yeah? Please stand up so we can see you. Yeah, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Maybe can you redefine your question a bit, because I'm not sure what you mean by plants. Seagrass. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So what we studied actually was the microalgae. So these are very small animals. So when there's a lot of particles, that's where the effect also comes from. So it's not that they ingest the particles, but they can be exposed to the chemicals. But we have actually not really gone into plants higher than the algae. So it's a very interesting question, but this is not within the scope of the work that we did here.
So maybe for coming research, also like the seaweeds and the sea plants, because they're feeding on the sediment, right? So A very interesting question. It's good to take this with us for following research. Thank you very much, all four of you. Just to mention your name, so you can Google them and watch their research. You could be Googling Andrew Watts, Myra van der Meulen, Ghada EL SERAFY, or Therese KARLSSON. And we're going to add some more names to that list because we have 4 more researchers we're going to ask your concentration for. They all have 7 minutes. And well, as you see, they did a really great job, right? So we also have a high expectation of our next researcher's presentation. Please, I hope it's possible for you to stay focused. After this part, we'll relax a little bit and make sure that you have all the time to process all this information. In this order of appearance, and you're going to see me trying to pronounce all these beautiful names right, because we have such an international group here. We have Dariya HADZHIYSKA, we have Pedro FERNÁNDEZ, we have Susanne ALTVATER, and Agni KALFAGIANNI. I did my best, and listen to them because their information is more than worth it. Yes.
Imagine for a moment that it's 2050. Or perhaps if you're really optimistic, it's 2020. And we're looking at the ocean of tomorrow. And there's a cause for celebration because something extraordinary has happened. Something that I think few people would have expected was possible back in 2015. Because we have stopped the flow of marine litter going into our seas and oceans. Not only in Europe, but also our neighbors have. And we've transitioned into a system of this is still imagining, huh? We have transitioned into a system of production and consumption that does not create waste, does not make a huge mountain of disposable items. There's no such thing as planned obsolescence anymore. And we've shut down what some people call resource crematoria. Anybody have an idea what I mean? Garbage incinerators. The economy is circular now, and perhaps Europe has been leading the way through its science, good governance, and a high level of democracy. Of course, there is residual litter still left. We've got a legacy of nanoplastics and microplastics. And this will take maybe 1,000 years to completely be mineralized. But let's say much of the easily accessible litter has been, macrolitter, has been collected from the beaches and from the seabeds. Now in 2050, the world economy is definitely still techno-exuberant. We love new technological fixes. But we've also reconfigured our economy towards low material consumption. And that was not the end for businesses. It was the beginning of a new world. And leadership in governments, as we heard before the break, played a big role in making this happen. For instance, by setting clear game rules and level playing field. And boy, were people working in companies happy about that, because they were empowered when they presented their plans to their shareholders and boards of directors about their own marine litter reduction measures that they were going to implement in their own organizations. And with all of this reduction of waste in our seas came a vast positive impact on natural capital and our health. And I think back in 2015, possibly there were some of those some of this future image was already emerging. Okay, back to 2015, CleanSea project, little project, big project, still can't find all the answers. But we promised you a roadmap by the end of this year, and the roadmap, that's like a general plan. It can help create a dialogue and some kind of agreement about which direction we should be going in. It provides a framework to help us coordinate what is to come. It has a starting point, it has a direction, and it has a destination, a vision of where we want to go. And guess why we called our project CleanSea? Because that's basically their destination. Right now, at the point of departure, we have a littered EU and a littered world. Litter of all sizes through the marine food chain that we're a part of as well. But we're also seeing it now more clearly in our rivers and indeed in your urban environments. The direction is towards marine litter reduction strategies, and lots of them. I would like to say that good environmental policies get good, partly because of the data coming from the natural world, which is what you heard in the first 4 CleanSea Chronicles. And what are some of the directions that we need to go in terms of knowledge and understanding of this natural world? If you've heard my talks before, you might have heard me, because I like to cite this old EEA report about lessons learned from past contamination problems. Because you kind of get a déjà vu if you work in contamination sciences. Do you see the same mistakes being made again? But when we see them, we know from past experiences that we should keep monitoring them when we see them, and we should try to fill in any scientific data gaps. And I think we've seen enough signals on the stage today, and we knew actually before we started this project that there are a lot of signals out there that we should be monitoring and increasing our knowledge about this. And to do this, we really need to continue this method development that's really tricky for both sampling and analysis. As for all new analytes, we need to build up these networks of proficiency testing. We need to train each other. We need interlaboratory studies. And we need to get the quality control right in order to see these trends and monitor this stuff that we want to do here in Europe. And there's a suite of instruments and analytical techniques at our disposal, like FTIR, NIR, hyperspectral imaging, Raman spectroscopy, and mass spectrometry. We've used them all in CleanSea. And as Therese said, one size does not fit all. No single technique can answer all of our research questions, and we're going to have to continue to use a combination of these. I think we should be less ambiguous in what we mean by the word microplastics. And I'll tell you in the break what I mean by that. We should learn how to detect those nano-sized plastic particles in the environment. That's a huge frontier in our research realm. And we know that this litter doesn't just disappear when we can't see it anymore. It just gets smaller in size. And we've also seen that these small size ranges can have an effect on the organisms living in the ocean, as well as the larger chunks, of course. So as I said, we need to keep providing policymakers and everybody with this data about the effects. And I think in the future, we should also expand it to also humans, because this is what policymakers want to know. How bad is it? And I think if we start to find out about this, this will drive more policy and actually also new research. We also found out in the natural sciences part of the project that litter doesn't just float, it also sinks down to the bottom. And we're finding that that's a big accumulation zone, and the models also help us understand that. And we also see that organisms are consuming this, and they're like pre-concentration steps. So when we're monitoring, we could look to these environmental matrices like sediments and biota, filter feeders and others. And they are very good cost-effective ways of monitoring, because we're already collecting sediment samples and biota samples for other contaminants. And so as we're gathering all of this information about the effects and the distribution of this stuff, and we have these ecosystem models at our disposal, we can really go to a new level of understanding. So what kind of policies is this kind of knowledge supposed to feed into and support? As we heard in the second set of CleanSea Chronicles, we also looked at policy and management options that address this marine litter. As you know, we looked at all different life stages of a product, from design right up until it might become litter and you have to clean it up. And the policy options, they included economic instruments, but also hard law, regulations, and this co-management options like public-private partnerships and voluntary measures. And there are opportunities to reduce marine litter on every governance level, from local right up until international. We have this whole mix of policies coming out, and we know that there isn't just a silver bullet that we can rely on, that we have to take on this diversity in the mix. And it's not even a question of copy-paste from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, to the Baltic, or to the North Sea. Because each, as we understood from working with each other and working in each of these regions, there are a lot of differences in litter types, in historical background, in political willingness, and also geopolitical conditions, which we have to take into account. As also mentioned, that if we want to be cost-effective as policymakers, we want to target top marine litter items. And economic policy instruments are powerful in transforming markets in this and changing behavior through incentives and disincentives. And these come in the form of taxes and fees and sometimes subsidies. And we can expand them from things that are working well, like on plastic bags. These taxes on plastic bags, and that really effectively reduces items, but why not expand that to other types of products? We have deposit refund schemes that Pedro mentioned for drinking bottles, and they incentivize collection and recycling, but we can also expand them to things like fishing gear. And these instruments have a broader indirect effect on it by influencing the demand for products and ultimately influencing the design. We have and we will continue to have to depend on regulations to enforce the compliance with issues and procedures that our society has agreed upon. As Susanne said, we also have a problem with the implementation, and that has implications for marine litter, and we have to find a way, perhaps by providing more guidance and more motivation to the people who are supposed to be implementing these directives. Maybe by explaining what these directives mean and how they can really benefit us. The future should hold policy mainstreaming. That means things like integrating resource efficiency targets into product design, eco-innovation, green public procurement. We have all the measures based on existing principles like extended producer responsibility and integrated product policy. And this is good because, as we found out yesterday, the circular economy is on its way into European policy now, and we can build this up. It means that the production and consumption goes on with green energy, without toxic waste, and these manufactured products are not fast-tracked for the dump, but they're instead designed for reduce, reuse, recycle, remanufacture, all those R's that we actually already know. And I think because of this, this circular economy can bring a lot of collateral benefit for reducing marine litter. Okay, to round it off, this CleanSea project came into effect after the Marine Strategy Framework Directive identified that there's a lot of signals that there's garbage in the ocean. And they created a goal for good environmental status for descriptor 10, as we call it, marine litter. But the problem didn't start in the sea. It started with our system on land, and we've mentioned that several times today. But this MSFD is the one calling for action. And we do need action on all the different governance levels in all the different regions. We need instruments in place at all those steps in a product chain. And so no one has to feel left out, because there's a role for everybody. It won't come as a surprise if I say that we humans are not exactly hardwired for being very rational actors, and that we really work towards things when the reward is only very far in the future. Lots of times, the big policy shifts that we might be hoping for come only after a catastrophe. But I don't think that anyone here feels like waiting till things get worse when we have all of these measures and ideas at hand right now. So let's see if we can act like there is a future, and that future has productive and healthy seas in it.
Thank you very much, Heather. So stay here, because I guess it's a nice moment for you as well. We have all these results, lots of paperwork and presentations, but also something that became the reason for you to host this session here in Amsterdam. We're going to the official showing of the documentary CleanSea. There is a copy available. You might have found it already in your the information set you were given. And so, because it's hard to find a nice symbolic way to start a movie, because it's just press play on tape. I'll just give this to you. The lights will go down, and we're all gonna applaud and enjoy the first viewing of the CleanSea documentary, because you, as a product coordinator with your entire team, you guys did a great job. So compliments on that.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations on that beautiful documentary, which already shows how many different organizations and parties we're going to have to need to be collaborating together to get it done, and that it needs to be done. Obviously, for me, I have the advantage to be in a lot of events and projects around sustainability, and so I know a lot of facts, but this is startling. I think that's a correct English word, isn't it? Shocking. Just how bad it is if we don't act. And I think this maybe is the problem, because we're talking about microplastics or nanoplastics that even some of the most advanced researchers had trouble to find them. This is why it's a problem, and we're much more eager to talk about and maybe a tough political issue at the moment, but wars that are going on, or maybe pollution that we can see because we just can't see it. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Obviously, you need to let this all process in your mind, and I'll have some guests here. We're going to do a little Graham Norton kind of setting, or a little bit more Ellen DeGeneres. I don't have any chairs that flip back. I'm sorry. We don't have that effect here. We're going to talk with some representatives of the different areas. And during this talk, we also have the opportunity to make room for some questions. So we have a nice dialogue together to make sure that the questions that you need an answer to before you leave and can do your part in this elaborate problem that we need to fix all together. So I'm going to make you a little bit my, how do you call that? Yeah, but the newsroom. You know, each show that I just mentioned, they have this team of specialists, and they take like a month to think of 3 smart questions. So I'll give you a couple of minutes and come up with like a bunch of smart questions that we can ask to our specialists. First, let's introduce them and get them on stage, making sure obviously that they'll also get a nice warm applause of you all. And maybe this is also so loud that if someone fell asleep, I can't imagine it happened, but some people will fall asleep during a film, they wake up instantly. This is the effect we want to cause when we're welcoming to the stage. The Commission on Protection of the Black Sea Against Pollution will be presented by Irina Makarenko, and I practice on your name. OSPAR Commission from the Northeast Atlantic, we have John John Moat, yes, much easier than I thought. Come to the stage. When you're all here, we give you a big applause. And HELCOM Commission from the Baltic Sea, we have Stephanie Werner. Yes, please be seated on the chair that fits your outfit best. Yes. So we have this microphone, obviously, because we're spending public money. We didn't give you all a microphone. We have to share. And let's introduce you first. You're representing 3 of the 4 regions that were involved. Unfortunately, we had to, Tanya Hema had to cancel from the Mediterranean Sea. So let's start with you, Stephanie. You're close by from the Baltic Sea. First off, if you would describe that region, what is specific in that region if we look at pollution and the marine litter? Could you share a little bit so we get to know you and the Baltic Sea area?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for introducing us. I'm actually not from the Commission, not from the HELCOM Commission. I'm from the German Federal Environment Agency, and I was asked by the HELCOM Commission to represent HELCOM here today because I was highly involved in the development of the Regional Action Plan for the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is a very shallow sea, not many fish species, for example, a very sensitive, polluted sea. And we face some specific litter problems there. For example, we have a lot of ghost nets. We found there abandoned, lost, and otherwise discarded fishing gear. So some specific problems we have to scope with. And yeah, we actually developed an action plan to target these items.
We're going to learn a little bit more about that later. First, let's get to know John a little bit better from the Northeast Atlantic. Are you from the Commission, or?
Yeah, I am.
I'm a real Commission member. Yes. So what's specific for that area, John?
So I think we've heard a lot about the North Sea and some of the challenges with high population. Again, a shallow sea, but OSPAR actually covers quite a large area. We reach out halfway across the Atlantic. So we go as far as the Azores, as far north as the Arctic Circle. So you have a lot of very different situations, a lot of different challenges within that area. If you look at the North Sea, where you have a lot of inputs from rivers, a lot of human activity. If you then go to the west coast of Ireland, where you maybe have more of an influence coming from litter and oceanic litter coming from the Atlantic. So there's different challenges there.
Okay, so it would also make the work of the Commission for that part more difficult, right? Because you have more diversity in the... then we'll go to the Black Sea. Irina Makarenko. That was the first name that I pronounced right?
Yeah, because I spent the entire coffee break trying to learn.
You were training me.
Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone. It is a pleasure to join you. I represent actually half of the Black Sea Commission because we are only 2 people. So you can see almost all the Commission here. So actually the Black Sea is also a sea which has many challenges, starting from the political challenges now, because only 2 countries are members to the European Union, and 4 countries, unfortunately, since these 2 weeks, 4 rest of the countries are not even having diplomatic relations, although in the Commission we have all the common goal towards protection of the Black Sea, so we don't have that challenge in the Commission, but still. In terms of the pollution, of course, the sea is anoxic, that's why it is actually black. It has, of course, the problems with nutrients, with, all the problems that other regional seas are facing. And with the marine litter, it is more or less okay because we're not really monitoring marine litter, so that's why it's very difficult to really assess, the challenges that we have regarding marine litter.
Yeah. So in this project, the idea was for all those different commissions to work together. Is it because you're already describing a problem? Because so many different nationalities or parties or countries can be involved in monitoring or cleaning an ocean and the different laws that come to there. So how to overcome this challenge, bringing together all these differences that exist in research or cleaning? Who could I address that? John?
Well, I think we have one common driver between the different regional seas is the Marine Strategy Framework Directive from the EU. The regional seas are do the regional coordination. Obviously, you don't have any borders in a sea, so you need to look at common monitoring, common indicators, and then work towards common measures. So that's the first way that to bring the countries together. Also that's the role of regional seas before the MSFD, was to work collaboratively on common oceans. So there's a strong driver there to take the work forward together.
Yeah. Stephanie?
Yeah, and it's not a new problem. For example, the Osprey region is monitoring for a very long time. Also, for the Baltic Sea, we have quite comprehensive data sets for beach litter, for example. And I think if you start thinking about measures, you always come to the same fields of actions and the same sectors which need to be addressed, such as sea-based sources, such as shipping or fishing, and land-based sources, of course, sewage management, riverine inputs, and so on. So I think in the end, we share common ground on what needs to be addressed, and we can exchange knowledge on that.
And here, I guess we also have to acknowledge that the differences in the way that the different commissions are organized and the seas that they operate in, that also will determine in which way can we have an ambition, can we have a goal to reach a first step, right? We heard that in one of the first presentation, that an ambitious goal for Holland may be not ambitious for Bulgaria, so for to say. So how does this affect what you take back to report to the region where you come? Is this immediately translating into concrete goals that you can roll out in the region that you are operating in?
You mean the research results we heard?
Yeah, well,
about?
because the differences are so. So, is it for the Baltic Sea? Will there be different steps to be taken then for the Black Sea, so to say?
Thank you. Despite the challenges that they were mentioned, I think that since 2013 we have a common vision of what we are, following. And actually in the same people were in Berlin conference on marine litter. So it was agreed, and it was our message in the bottle, so-called. So it was agreed to follow an approach to have regional action plans for all the 4 regional seas. So we are, we are on the different stages now. I would say that the Black Sea is trying to catch up with other regional seas, but all of us, as far as I know, has made some steps towards these action plans. Even us, I'm happy to say it, because 2 years ago it was nothing to say. Now this issue, the issue of marine litter, is back on the agenda of the Black Sea Commission, and we now have concrete steps. And we have Bulgaria, who came up with a proposal of the draft regional action plan for the Black Sea. We have support of the European Commission. We have support of the United Nations Environmental Programme. So we are now trying to catch up with monitoring guidelines for marine litter, with concrete actions for the action plan, with different things that different seas are considering important for themselves. Because of course you cannot really compare us in terms of different parameters, starting from biological and finishing with political things. But I think that having this approach of addressing the issues of marine litter through the action plans, we are gradually covering this challenging topic on our agenda.
Great. So, and that way you're looking at, obviously you're using the general outcome of this project to make sure that you have an individual approach, and this is why we have to see it at all as all these different areas, right? But what would be the common things? What can we learn from each other? Okay, so what they're doing great in Bulgaria, we can also use this maybe to elaborate what you're already doing for OSPAR?
Yeah, that collaboration between regions is something that we're working on. We had a first meeting in Paris a couple of months ago, September. Yeah, looking at, obviously there's specifics to each region in terms of the types of litter, the main sources, what you need to tackle first in terms of measures, whether it's waste management or it's dealing with specific sources. But obviously there's a lot of common actions that are the same, and as you mentioned, we're all dealing with public money, so what we don't want to be doing is repeating the same actions in each of the regional seas. If there's common measures that we can take, or if one area is leading on one measure, they can then share that best practice with the other areas. So we're actively working between the secretariats of the different regions to make sure we capitalize on those lessons learned.
Stephanie?
Yeah, maybe to add on that, and of course, a lot of these actions require dialogue with certain stakeholders, with third parties, which are sometimes not part of the commissions or of the members of the commissions. But still, they are all in the end are the same stakeholder we need to address, and we are already in dialogue with. And so I think there's a lot of common ground. And I am actually really interested in the specific outcomes of that project. We heard a lot, but a lot of questions were raised as well today, and I hope a lot of these questions will be answered in the results once we have a deeper look inside.
Yeah, Irina?
Thank you. Reflecting the interaction with the projects, actually we are all participating in different types of projects, and they are really helping our to link the scientific interface and some policymakers, and actually we are providing a bridge between them. For us, the CleanSea is actually a kind of a scientific evidence of the impact of marine litter, because even if it's obvious, it should be proven somehow. We also have some other projects, but they're mostly oriented on, for example, dissemination of information or some other marine litter related activities. But having this scientific evidence is really important, because in order to convince the countries which are as I said, in our region, MSFD is not
Yes.
legally binding. So in order
Priorities
to-
are different. Yeah.
In order to convince the countries, you really need to prove and really show the evidence that there is an impact, and that's why the project is really helping us with it. And we are really waiting forward the official deliverables to be able, actually from our side, I think we are very important stakeholders for any project implemented in the European space, let's say, in terms of dissemination, in terms of sustainability of the deliverables of each and every project. So here we also stand ready to support the project in this direction.
Okay, so I already told you, and you were part of it, I have a smart audience, only smart, intelligent people, a lot of whom have experience in this field, so maybe someone has a question that we could talk about. It could be a direct question to one of the commission members, or it could be a question that you want to discuss together here, because you also have a lot of experience in your field. So who would like to raise a question? We have a question over here. Mr. Cameraman, please stand up so you can hear your question. Who are you and what would you like to ask?
My name is Stijn, I'm from the Netherlands, Alkmaar. I'm doing Who, Where, What TV, and my question is actually, who do you think is more responsible for the problem? Is it the producer or is it actually the consumer? I would like to have the opinion of you all three.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, because we're already talking about where the the solutions. So let's be salvated. Yeah, the solutions that come from. Design is one of the things. Prevention is what comes about. Where does the problem lie? Consumer or producer? John.
I wouldn't like to lay the blame. I think there's many different sources, and I think you have to tackle them all. I think there's nobody I think people don't plan in their consumption to go out and cause a problem. Sometimes it's because of lack of awareness. Sometimes it's because, as we say, a systemic problem in the way things are produced. So I think marine litter is such a diffuse problem where there are many different sources, many different routes. A wicked problem, as was said, that I think you have to tackle each one of those.
Yeah, could it be fair to say, well, if we need to say who's to blame, then it's both. Everybody is to blame then, because obviously there are manufacturers that they don't take count of what they use to wrap their products or stuff, and we have a lot of consumers that at a day at the beach. Maybe the same consumer that says, I'm willing to pay for a clean beach, is also one of the consumers that leaves his stuff at the beach behind. But someone is leaving it there, right?
Yeah, I think there's certainly both causes of the problem.
Yeah. Okay, Stephanie wanted to react as well. Who's to blame, Stephanie?
Well, looking, for example, at Germany, we always are very proud of our very nice waste management system, which is, of course, in place. But we are also the biggest producer, together with Italy, in the European context of plastics, which we export. So their producer responsibility comes in. We also have a recycling rate of maybe 34%, which is nice, but a lot of space to go beyond. So I think it's really both sides, and it's a lot of gaps there as well. For example, for littering, we don't have any data. All the numbers you get from Plastics Europe is for waste which is actually kept in the circle. So we don't know what is escaping the circle. We know it's around 30 million tons in Europe every year, which somehow go into the environment. So these data gaps have to be closed, and also, it's a question of single-use items, in my opinion, and of long-term applications. As long as things have no value for the consumers, they won't be valued. So I think if you talk about prevention, you always have to talk about reduction in production, especially for single-use items.
Okay, thank you, Irina. Yeah.
You know, since we already have a difficult political situation in the region, I have no mandate to blame anybody else. I mean, it's already enough. I also think that it's both sides, actually, and sometimes it's just a simple awareness, even. Like just myself, like a customer, and I'm living in Turkey at the moment already for 5 years. I cannot understand how this country is very advanced in many techniques in fighting with microplastics and different things, and they have, for each municipality, they have a separate action plan actually on marine litter, which was endorsed by our advisory groups. But at the same time, every time going for shopping, I bring at least 15 plastic packages.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
So this is actually a question, you know, even my own question to
and
myself.
then if you come to awareness, I think that a lovely example that you would say Turkey is a very advanced economy and has technology. Then I was in Rwanda in June. This is one of the countries that just said, plastic bags, let's quit. And they like overnight, they quit with plastic bags. You think, why don't we have that in Holland? Why doesn't anyone, or in Turkey for that matter? So how will we raise the awareness? Because obviously today we're looking at some very confronting data. I see a lot, and still I'm shocked. So how can we raise awareness? Because obviously to make sure that policymakers eventually will start making different kind of laws, we need the crowd also to get moving, to say, I don't want to eat my fish with microplastics. How to get people involved? John is going to give us the answer.
I think one of there's always going to be a big proportion of the public that are environmentally interested and will be aware of this situation, but you also need to get to the other part that's not. And I think that's one of the things that microplastics, when you show that organisms are taking this waste on board, and you show that there's a potential path there towards human consumption, that can really raise the awareness within the general public that are not maybe so aware of other environmental issues, and that can be a way in to then raise their awareness on all the other topics we've been talking about, the circular economy, how we should reuse, recycle paths of litter into the marine environment. So I think you need something to get it on up to that general consciousness within the general public.
Okay. Unfortunately, because of time, we'll have to leave the discussion plenary for here as it is now. Hopefully you will be with us when we're having drinks, and there will be more discussion to hear more from you guys, also from the project and the commission that you're representing. So I would like a very big applause and thank you for your contribution. Irina, John and Stephanie, thank you very much. I would like to ask Heather to come over. And also Hans, we've both seen you before. Shall I take the microphone for you? Yeah. Join me on stage, please, because you guys want to sit down? Yeah, we can sit down. We can still play a little bit of a talk show. Yeah, I like it. Maybe I do have a chair that flips over. No, it will stay over. You will flip almost because of how long you are. Stay stable. So we're agenda setting. We're talking about what needs to be done. We're maybe pointing a little bit the finger, but we don't know in what direction. But we know that there's a big problem. What would be the next step if you had a say, Heather? What do you want that from this project? What would come next?
Well, I'm a researcher, so
more research.
Yeah. No, I think I do think that I'll make that point because that's what I'm confronted with all the time. We are hearing every time I speak to a policymaker, they ask, "So how bad is it?" And I speak to journalists sometimes, and they ask the exact same thing. Everybody will want to know that, and we still have to get a better answer to this question and to refine it more, and also the effects on human health. I think now the European Marine Board is really pushing to incorporate human health in the oceans, and you can meet now medical doctors who are even interested in the oceans, and I think making these kinds of connections will help us inspire people working on policy to do their expertise, use their expertise.
So then we'll have more data, we'll have more research, and for the common man, understandable what the consequences of that data is, how it's affecting my health. How will this translate into policy, Hans? How will we be able to inspire the politicians in Brussels and in the individual states as well?
I do agree that we need more data. but not just more data, because we have a ton of data on many things in society, and we don't just need more data. That's creating more noise. We need better sound. And I think the sound is sort of the understanding that is based on the data. And I think this project sort of went through the cycle to create knowledge instead of more data just. When you asked what needs to happen, I think on most of the nature directives, natural capital, biodiversity, ecosystem type of legislation, better implementation. I mean, that is step one. We are nowhere near the goals for 2020, let alone beyond, on any of the nature or biodiversity legislation in Europe or across the world. So let's start taking that sort of policy serious and understand that this is not about plants and animals necessarily. It's about the systems that sustain life on this planet and that are the basis on which we build our societies. And if we don't start to understand that, we're going to live under the illusion that we can just continue and degrade, erode the capital. Yeah? Nobody would say, oh, let's build our society on an eroding economic capital or on human capital. But apparently with natural capital, we seem to be fine with it. So that needs to change. In terms of additional policies, I think the precautionary principle was mentioned, and it's clear that on some of the topics that were brought up today, I think we should take it serious. We have indeed done historically in our work on early warnings or late lessons from early warnings, complicated. We have looked at 42 cases where scientists said, guys, we think we have a serious problem here. Yeah? And based on those 42 cases, we came to the conclusion, one, that they are hardly ever wrong. When scientists come with that, they're usually on solid ground. Secondly, it's much cheaper to take early action and precaution than to try to fix things later on. So this is also a type of knowledge, not in micrograms and ppms, but in sort of an understanding of what the consequences for society are. And I think the precautionary principle is one of the 4 core principles in the Lisbon Treaty for European environmental policy making. Let's take it serious, because this is serious business. It is very serious business.
The problem that we're fighting is human nature? Our nature to not want to change anything, to leave things as they are and not see the danger. Because it brings me to the image of the boiling frog syndrome. We like the warm water. Heather.
Yeah, well, actually, did you notice that the frogs actually don't, they actually do jump out. And I think that, well, we have to hope that they will be smart enough and that we'll be smart enough too. And I think if, you know, lots of people are interested in this topic. And just this summer, there was someone who works for the biggest road manufacturer of the Netherlands. Now, can you imagine what does manufacturing a road have to do with marine litter? But he, in his own company, was thinking about what can I do from my perspective, and he had all kinds of ideas, and this is something that they are developing to use ocean plastic, and I think these are things that are signals that it is a broad subject that touches a lot of people, and it's such a visual subject as well.
Yeah. So obviously we hope that the film will contribute to this, and all the research data and material that will be available later. So is there a next step within the project that we can expect, or maybe even hope for? Will there be like an endurance of the project?
Well, the project is going to be closing soon. We have a very nice website. Thank you to the EUCC for doing that. And we're posting all kinds of summaries of our work, and we'll be posting the deliverables that we are working on now at the end of the year, beginning of next year. Everything should be up there. And so we don't have a continuation of the project. There will be more work going on. I should say that the marine unit of DG RTD, the Research and Innovation Director General, they are really pushing for more work in this area. So that should be coming up in Horizon 2020.
Okay, let's hope that will be continued in that matter. Then obviously we had some contours of I'll get to you, of a lot of organizations that are also represented here. We saw the surfboard. Is the surfboard back to its owner? Yeah, you got it back? Great. Surfboard made out of plastic caps. And I also saw some people with plastic bags. They were cleaning up the area around here. So we have a lot of organizations that are involved in some way on, the cleaning up bit and maybe even the prevention bit. What would you like to address to those people? Maybe give them a motivation extra to leave the room later on and to continue their work, or to even maybe double the work effort.
Well, that's a big question. I think that we are all really responsible for our own actions, and I think that the system that we operate in really determines a lot of our choices, and the things that are so it's very difficult for to do personal change on your own. If I want to be a zero waste consumer, it's very difficult. If I manage it, I'll probably get in the news because it's so special. But the things that are going on with these NGOs, I think it's really very visible. It's involving a lot of people. If you meet anybody under 12, they know more than me about this subject, because they've been really involved in it. And I think it's not only for us, but also we do have to take care of this planet also for the future generations. And that is very difficult because we don't really feel something for future generations. So that's a limitation in our neocortex that has to do a bit more evolving probably before we really end up being able to rationalize and this.
Yeah, Hans?
I don't know about the cortex much, but that's why I think, and it's a fundamental thing, we speak about the next generations, but it's actually this generation, right? It's this one. We don't have several generations to solve it. If you're born today as a young girl, by 2050, you will be 35 years old. We promise this young girl that she will be living in a circular economy, low carbon, with strong natural capital. We've got a lot of work to do, and we better start today, because everything we do today will be there in 2050. Any energy infrastructure that we build today has a life cycle to 2050. Every road that you build will be there in 2050. So what we do today, to a large extent, will determine whether and if we can reach those lofty 2050 goals. And if we're going to have healthy, clean, and productive oceans, those three fundamental goals will be the underlying current of change in society. So, of course, we do it for the next generations, but it's this generation. And 2050 is far away, it's unimaginable. Let's then think to 2030. I call that the imaginable future. If we cannot imagine what we should do in terms of policy, in terms of technology, behavioral change, where we want to go, educational change, by 2050, I think we are collectively failing. In the knowledge system, in the educational system, in the political system, in companies, in boardrooms of big multinational companies, that's not too far away. Let's get going. And we know what the sense of direction is. That's 2050. We need to know where we want to be in 2030, because that is the next policy horizon in Europe and globally. 2020 is done, you know. It's done. There's still some work to do, don't get me wrong. But the next goal is 2030. Let's get going. Yeah?
Thank you very much. We're going to leave it at that. Leslie and Hans Bruynink, thank you very much. And also a last thank you to all the people that made a contribution to the CleanSea project. Then we're addressing researchers, commission members, obviously a lot of volunteers, people from the film crew, the people that were interviewed, and all these people that helped from the university as well. So thank you very much. And also we would like to thank you for all coming here and making this important, because you spend an entire afternoon here soaking in all this knowledge about the sea and just how bad it is at this moment. And hopefully we got you engaged and involved in dreaming with us of the goal where we want to get a clean sea, because all the people here, they don't only think it's possible, they want to believe it's possible, but we need your help. So just to keep it in the words of Hans, keep going because of time. All other questions, we'll have to take them with us to the drinks that are ready for you. Also, let nothing go to waste, please. Have a nice talk and make new connections, because also a thing that I found so beautiful is that all these people from different countries were working together, and I guess together we're so much smarter than just as one. Good luck with your part and your contribution in creating a better world, and hopefully we'll have a clean sea by 2020. Anyway, yeah, let's try to do that. Okay, thank you for coming. See you next time.